Hi. Today's story is about an Amy Grant concert I went to back in 1986. And I don't know if there's really a moral to this story or a learning thing that maybe you should take away from it. Actually, I think there really is, but I'm not really sure which one I want to highlight. So I'm going to let you guys at the end of it decide where you think that maybe you learned something out of this story. And I got to tell you, it was a very eventful day because it was also the very first time I performed at a wedding. I was a music and history major in college and I wanted to be a songwriter. And so I had written all these songs, and someone I was working with at a hospital, that I worked at here in town, was looking for something different for her wedding. And so I said, hey, I've written a few songs. Maybe one of these will hit it for you. So I brought a tape in. Yes, we had cassette tapes back then. This is back in the 80s after all. I brought a cassette in of some of my songs, and she listened to some of my songs, and she said, well, that's not quite what I want, but will you sing at my wedding? And I was stunned because I'd never thought of myself as a singer. I had a teacher in college who thought that maybe I could make a good opera singer if I could learn a language other than English, which I couldn't. And I just had never thought of myself as a singer or a performer. Yes, I had to record my own songs so that I could play them for other people, hoping that maybe they would record them. But I never saw myself as that. But I decided, hey, why not? And not only did I sing, but I played. And the very first song I did, I had to actually start singing it before I could start playing it. It was a John Denver song, Follow Me. I mean, really. Now, here's the thing. The same day I had that, I had someone else at work who I thought was really kind of cute. And I was hoping that, I hadn't had a relationship in, at least by that time, I think it was 3 years. 3 or 4 years. I hadn't had a relationship with anybody. And so I was looking for love in all the right places, I think. And her name was Michelle. And she came to me one day and asked me if I wanted to go to an Amy Grant concert. I knew who Amy Grant was, mainly because I had worked in a music store back in the early 80s, and a lot of sheet music was out there. She had been a religious singer at the time, and I'm not religious whatsoever, but she was really pretty. And at this time, she had this song out that was called Love Will Find a Way, and they were showing it on MTV, and it was kind of a cool song. I enjoyed it. And so I said, sure, let's do this. After all, I'm thinking, this ought to be a nice concert. Yeah, it's probably going to be overly religious, but you know what? Michelle asked me to go to a concert. That sounds cool. Now, the thing is that the wedding turned out to be the same day, which I didn't know when I agreed to go. And the wedding was an hour south of where I live now. And Rochester is 90 minutes west. So in essence, I had to go sing at the wedding, had to get my piece of cake because, I did it for free, but I was getting my cake, had to drive home, change from the fancy stuff I wore for the wedding into something different, drive back into the city of Syracuse, because I don't live right in the city of Syracuse, to pick her up, and then drive to Rochester. And we did not have GPS back then, and I had never been to Rochester. So I had to try to find out where this place was. We had maps. She read the map, and we eventually ended up downtown at the auditorium, the name of which I cannot remember right now. And it doesn't matter because that doesn't mean anything to the story. Now, on the way there, we're just talking in general. She says, oh, Amy Grant is my favorite. I have everything she has. I've never got to see her in concert, but I just love her. Anytime she's on TV, I watch. And I'm just kind of casually listening. Everyone has someone that they really like a lot. I was a Michael Jackson, Jackson 5, Jackson's guy. That's my guy. And I had already seen him in concert twice. So I understood fandom of this type. And, why not? So anyway, I'm going to an Amy Grant concert. This ought to be a nice, calm concert. I can deal with the religious stuff, I figure, for at least a little while. Not a big deal. So we get there about an hour and a half early. And it's cold. It's just a cold day. And she wanted to stand outside. I said, okay, why do you want to stand outside? I want to see when the bus comes in bringing Amy. Well, this was something different for me, but okay, sure, let's stand outside and wait for the bus. Well, now it's about 15 minutes before the concert's supposed to start. They said, you know what, maybe she's already gotten here. Maybe she's already inside. She said, well, you're probably right. Let's go inside. So we go inside, and you know what? We are in the 6th row. On the floor in this gigantic auditorium. I'm thinking, wow, she really does like Amy Grant. And the thing is, I actually paid for the tickets, but I didn't necessarily know where we were sitting. I just gave her the money. I said, let me pay for this because, this is the 80s. You're still trying to be gallant. Even though she asked me if I wanted to go, I wanted to be gallant, so I paid for it. And by the way, concerts cost a lot less back then. The Jacksons concert cost me $50 to go to Buffalo, but that was the Jacksons. This cost something like, I think, $20 a person, which in essence was still kind of a lot of money, but it wasn't, overwhelming. It wasn't going to kill me. So we're sitting here. Now, I hadn't been paying much attention to when she got in the car. And she had this big bouquet of flowers when we actually got out of the car. And I said, you brought flowers? She said, oh, yeah, I've got to go up and give Amy my flowers. Okay. So, like I said, we've got flowers. So it turns out there were 2 bands before Amy. And, I mean, bands. This sucker was loud. This was not the kind of concert I was expecting. It was a rock concert. I know what rock concerts were like because I had gone to a couple without knowing what I was in for. So the first group comes out and they're just loud. I can't hear anything that's going on. This is probably the best dressed audience I've ever seen. Everyone was dressed nice. No one was wearing t-shirts. There were no holy jeans. Everyone was dressed really nice. They were all doing, let's see, I think it's this thing, whatever, or however that is, and the hands in the air, which was their version of praying to God. I don't know, but everyone was doing that, but they were screaming like maniacs. I said, wow, what is this? So the first group comes out, they do 3 or 4 songs, they leave. Now a second group comes out, and it was led by Amy Grant's husband at the time. And he does her song, Love Will Find a Way. He does her song because I guess he wrote it. So he does his version of the song. And it's loud, and it's just messy. I'm thinking, oh goodness, what is all this? Now, Michelle loves this because she's saying, oh yeah, that's Amy's husband. He is great. I love him too. I love Amy more, but I love him too. So she's happy. I'm happy. Anyway, we finally get to Amy Grant. And it's loud. Everything is loud. We're in the 6th row. They got these giant speakers up on stage. I can't hear anything except loud. I wasn't expecting that. I'd heard the song on TV. I knew some of the other religious stuff because, like I said, I worked in a music store, so I'd heard a couple of things. She had a lovely voice, but in this instance, everything was just loud. She looked good, but she was loud, and everything was loud. And at one point, Michelle says, I got to go up and give Amy my flowers. I said, are you really going to do this? I'm thrown by this. Oh, yes. So she gets up, and she goes up to the front of the stage. And a whole lot of other people go up to the front of the stage. And she comes back and she's happy. Amy took the flowers out of my hand. I'm thinking, oh, okay, wow, that was great. Maybe I would have reacted that way. No, I don't think I would have reacted that way. Okay, maybe I would have reacted that way if it had been Donna Summer, but who knows. Anyway, it's loud. Everything's just loud. I'm not enjoying myself. As a matter of fact, a lot of the concert, I was doing this because it was just so loud. Totally unexpected. The concert eventually ends. So we're leaving. We're walking out, and she says, well, we have to go out back. I said, what do you mean, go out back? Oh, Amy always comes out after the concert, and she talks to her fans. But Michelle, it's a little cold outside, whatever. Oh, please. And she gives me the eyes. And, like I said, I hadn't had a relationship in a long time. She gave me the eyes. Okay, let's go outside. So we're standing outside because there's the buses. And we know that Amy's going to be coming out. And it was about 95 minutes later, Amy comes out. Yeah, it's Amy! And she says, Thank you guys so much for waiting. I wish I could stay and talk to you, but I've got another concert tomorrow afternoon, and we just have to go. And Amy gets on the bus, and they leave. And I'm thinking, well, that really was a major waste of time. But Michelle's happy. Amy talked to us. Well, Amy talked to everybody. You know, that little brief thing. That's not enough for me. Okay, fine. We finally make it back to the car. We start driving back home. We're on the New York State Thruway, and I said, you know what? I got to put gas in the car. So I pull over to the rest area to put gas in the car. What happens? Two buses come in, and it's Amy Grant's buses. I don't know how we ended up beating them to the rest area, but we did. Now, I'm thinking, well, okay, that's an interesting coincidence. We're ready to go. She says, oh, I have to go talk to Amy. You have to what? I have to go talk to Amy. This is a sign from God. I have to go talk to Amy. What? And she gets out of the car and she walks to the buses. Now, I'm watching this out of the mirror because the buses are behind me. And I've left the gas pumps, and I'm kind of just sitting in the car over here. And I see her. And she would walk to the bus, and she's doing one of these things, looking up. And then she would kind of saunter back. Then the door would open, and she would rush back. And then there's people getting off the bus, going into the area where you can get food or go to the bathroom, whatever. And she would just be talking to all kind of different people. And I'm serious. It was about 45, 50 minutes later when she finally makes it back to the car. And she's crying. They won't let me see Amy. You would think I'm just one little girl. They would let me see Amy. I had to deal with that most of the way back home, or at least back to her place. Because I'm a nice guy. I had to try to figure out a way to calm her down. I had to try to figure out what kind of logic I can say to her to get us out of this situation, because I did not want to hear her crying all the way home. Eventually she calms down, but she's now quiet. So now there's no conversation going on whatsoever. I wanted to put something on as far as music, but I didn't know what music to play. What do I put on? I can't put on happy disco because the mood isn't there. I could have put on classical, but I wasn't sure what that was. So we just kind of drove in silence. I get her back to her place. Before she gets out, she says, I'm sorry that I was so upset, and I appreciate that you took me to the concert. I said, well, that was okay. You know, I had a good time. I didn't have a good time, but I thought I had a good time. And that was that. That ruined that little bit of crush that I had on her. We still talk all the time at work because we both work together, but I got over that. Now, there are a bunch of stories in there. There are a bunch of things to kind of take away, but I'm not going to define it. I've just told the story of the Amy Grant concert. I lead a weird life. Anyway, do with that one what you will. Let's see what I come up with for next week. Y'all take care. Have a wonderful week.